Hey, listen up, everyone. You won't believe this. Our dear Mr. Brown here, he's only a high school dropout. Yet, he's teaching Spanish to all of us who are preparing for the high school entrance exams. Unbelievable, right?
Saying that, Morris began handing out A4 printouts. The printouts were filled with lengthy paragraphs of Spanish text. My colleague, a Cambridge graduate who looks down on me because I'm a high school dropout, was challenging me to translate these difficult Spanish passages into English. It's all part of his scheme to embarrass me in front of the students. Can we focus on the lesson at hand?
Oops. Don't run away. You always have this attitude that qualifications don't matter, but I believe they do. Qualifications determine how competent someone is, don't they? If you're not fixated on qualifications, then show us your actual abilities. Show us what a high school dropout is capable of in Spanish.
Well,
Can't do it, can you? If you can't, I'll have you resign.
it's disrespectful to the students and to us. The students looked on with puzzled faces, observing us. Even though it's unrelated to the lesson, I had no choice. I gathered my courage and uttered a certain phrase. And I could see my colleague's face turning pale in an instant. My name is Paul Brown. I will be turning 30 next month. For a long time, I had been involved in the care of my grandparents, but due to a certain opportunity, I found myself returning to work as a tutor at the same cram school where I once received assistance. This cram school primarily targets junior high and high school students, providing a range of detailed curricula, including a foundational course for school studies and an exam preparation course. While individual instruction, where it's one-on-one, and subject-specific group lessons are the mainstays of cram schools, ours stands out as a nationwide, large-scale institution that focuses primarily on group lessons while also offering online classes for those who prefer them. In general, students select subject-specific 60-minute lessons and receive support from other instructors to address their weak areas to complement in their learning journey. Now that the lingering summer heat has finally subsided, the cram school industry must begin considering various strategies for the upcoming exams. And just like everyone else, our cram school is starting to buzz with anticipation. Today, we have an internal meeting to discuss those strategies. This entire region has seen the rapid development of new residential areas, resulting in a high number of children. Naturally, a considerable number of these children are here for exam preparations. As a result, we need to select several high schools as potential candidates and implement more tailored strategies based on factors such as their average entrance exam scores and mock test results for the year. The high schools being discussed in the meeting were all located relatively close, within a 1-hour train ride. Most of the teachers were familiar with them, but due to my lack of knowledge regarding recent high school situations, there were moments where I struggled to keep up. That's when a recently joined colleague approached me.
Mr. Brown, you've been living here all this time, right? Did you attend a different high school?
Certainly, from someone who doesn't know anything, that would be the natural assumption. So I decided to be honest. No, I never took the high school entrance exam. I chuckled awkwardly. Most of my colleagues sitting here were aware of my circumstances, so they weren't particularly surprised. However, a man I didn't recognize, who was sitting right in front of me, leaned forward with great interest, delving deeper.
Mr. Brown, you're a high school dropout. That's amazing, being a tutor at an advanced prep school despite that.
Well, I didn't pay too much attention to what he was saying, but he continued to stare at me with curiosity. His name was George Morris, a teacher who joined us a year ago. He boasted about graduating from Cambridge University, and according to rumors, students who took his classes saw improvements in their grades, and several of them got accepted to their desired schools. With such a reputation spreading through word of mouth, the number of students enrolling increased, making Morris the most popular teacher in the cram school, earning the utmost trust from parents. Being subjected to such a sharp gaze from an amazing teacher, it made me feel like I was being labeled as a worthless high school dropout, and it made me feel uncomfortable. Although I put on a smile in front of everyone, the frequent glances from Morris continued to bother me, and I couldn't focus on the conversation at hand. The next day, as usual, I greeted my colleagues and took my seat, starting to prepare for the class.
Good morning, Mr. Brown.
Good morning. It was unusual for Morris to initiate the conversation, and as I was surprised, the unpleasant feelings from the previous day came rushing back.
Oh well, I have to say, I was surprised yesterday. I've never heard of a high school dropout becoming a tutor at a cram school before. What method did you use?
Well, I stumbled over my words.
So, Mr. Brown, you didn't go to high school, right?
Well, it's not like I didn't go.
Huh? It's not clear. How can someone with such a shady background oversee exam preparation? Hey, you know that the future of these students is at stake, right? If you give them half-hearted lessons, you'll ruin their lives, you know.
Well, I'm doing my best. But Morris let out a sigh and slammed his hand on my desk, making me flinch.
Don't get ahead of yourself. I graduated from Cambridge University. You're just a high school dropout, right? You have no right to speak.
With that, Morris left the room without giving me a chance to respond. Who was that guy? From that day on, the atmosphere between Morris and me became increasingly hostile. In our cram school, to ensure that teachers themselves approach classes with a sense of tension, other available instructors joined the students in attending classes. And today, it happened to be my turn to attend Morris' class since I had some free time. Given what had happened recently, I felt down, but I was curious about what kind of class he would conduct. When the bell for the start of the class rang, Morris entered the classroom exuding confidence as a popular instructor in every action and movement. However, as the class began, I struggled to keep up with the content that was progressing rapidly. Honestly, it was difficult to understand what he was teaching in certain parts. But naturally, there was no opportunity to ask questions. He seemed to be meticulously preparing for his classes almost every day, aiming to deliver thorough and detailed lessons based on his own theories. I desperately tried to comprehend his explanations, but the question marks in my mind continued to increase. In this way, the class proceeded smoothly, with only the sound of Morris' words and the scratching of his mechanical pencil resonating in the classroom. Then suddenly, Morris noticed a student. Apparently, the student was dozing off. As human beings, we all have limits to our concentration, and it's natural for such things to happen. However, Morris mercilessly began scolding the student in front of everyone.
You want to go to college, right? If it were another instructor, they might let it slide. But hey, I graduated from Cambridge University. If you're serious, then listen to my class until the end. Got it?
Intimidated by his overwhelming presence, the student nodded as best as they could before bowing their head down. Is graduating from Cambridge University really that impressive? Why does Morris insist so much on academic background? The thing is, I personally believe that academic background has nothing to do with one's knowledge or abilities. I have never really talked about myself to my students or other colleagues, and I don't intend to. For me, a cram school is a place to teach students, and as a tutor, my main goal is to meet their needs to the best of my ability. Of course, that also means constantly studying and sometimes seeking guidance from my fellow teachers. The director of the cram school understands my stance, but it seems that Morris is bothered by it, as he often says.
Brown, why don't you just be honest and tell us?
To which I usually respond with, academic background and the ability to effectively convey knowledge are two separate things. One day, I was feeling troubled. Without being notified, my assigned classes had been changed. In our cram school, for the foundational courses, one teacher handles multiple subjects on a rotating basis. However, for the exam preparation courses, there are dedicated teachers for each subject, and I am in charge of teaching Spanish. Today was supposed to be my day to teach the middle school Spanish class for the exam preparation course, but for some reason, my name was replaced with Morris, who is also responsible for teaching Spanish. If such changes are made with the mutual agreement of the parties involved, there wouldn't be any issues. However, Morris changed it without any discussion or notification. Concerned about the impact on the students' learning, I mustered the courage to tell him, Please don't make these arbitrary decisions. But Morris calmly responded with,
I did it because I felt sorry for the students being taught by a high school dropout like you. It's all for the sake of helping the students. If you don't like it that much, you can just quit.
He justified his actions with a nonchalant expression on his face. Morris's tyranny extended not only towards me, but to other teachers as well. Everyone had things they wanted to say to Morris, but because he was a popular instructor and a Cambridge graduate, it became the norm to just accept his behavior without resistance. Feeling that things couldn't go on like this, I was on the verge of a life-changing event. I was scheduled to teach the exam preparation course today, and it had been a while since I last took charge of that class. As we were approaching the final push, I had planned a curriculum to review the areas that everyone found challenging, and the students were earnestly going through their notes. However, just as the bell signaling the start of class rang, the classroom door suddenly swung open.
It's Joe. Is Joe taking the class too?
The classroom erupted into commotion. Joe is the nickname the students have given to Morris. Although the school policy is for students to address teachers by their last names, Morris, for some reason, wanted to have a closer relationship with the students and insisted on being called by that nickname. I temporarily set aside the textbook in my hand and approached Morris. Mr. Morris, is everything okay? We're in the middle of a class right now. I hadn't been informed that another teacher would be taking the class today. However, without listening to what I had to say, Morris brushed me aside and raised his voice in front of everyone.
Hey, listen up, everyone. This Mr. Brown here is amazing. Can you believe it? He didn't even go to high school. He's a high school dropout, yet he's teaching all of you Spanish. Isn't that incredible?
Saying that, Morris began distributing A4 printouts. The printouts contained long passages in Spanish, and upon closer inspection, I realized they were reading comprehension questions from a Spanish exam that had been used in the University General Entrance Examination 2 years ago. Naturally, the questions were extremely challenging for the students to solve.
Mr. Morris, what is this?
Facing the stupefied students, Morris continued with a glimmer in his eyes.
These are actual long reading comprehension questions from university entrance exams. Of course, it's difficult for you to solve them right away, but Mr. Brown here can read them fluently, right? After all, he's teaching you Spanish, crucial for your entrance exams, regardless of academic background.
Well, it's unrelated to the class.
Oops, Mr. Brown, don't run away. You always have this attitude that academic background doesn't matter, but I believe it does. It shows how capable a person is, their level, you know. If you don't care about academic background, then prove your skills.
But,
Oh, can't you do it? If you can't, then you'll have to leave.
The students looked at us with perplexed expressions. Despite that, Morris showed no concern for the students' reactions and went so far as to say something outrageous to me.
Mr. Brown, I'll give you until the end of the class. Finish it perfectly, every word and every letter, Morris said with a smirk on his face.
It seems like he's scheming to expose my low education in front of the students and embarrass me.
Well then, while Mr. Brown does his best, let's all work hard for our exams,
Morris declared, attempting to open the textbook in my place. However, the moon is beautiful, isn't it? I said.
Huh?
Morris was taken aback. I continued translating the Spanish without hesitation. The classroom fell into a silent atmosphere as the students listened attentively. I flawlessly translated the passage into easy-to-understand English suitable for middle school students, reading the entire Spanish passage out loud. It was. The students let out an impressed "oh" in response. This is a famous incantation from Spanish literature. Renowned authors often use challenging metaphors, so it can be quite difficult to translate into English. Even I found it a bit challenging, I explained. As I spoke, I made my way to the bookshelf at the back of the classroom and returned to the podium with a problem set in hand. Here you go, I said, handing it to Morris.
What's this all of a sudden?
This is something that a Cambridge University graduate like Mr. Morris can easily read, right? Go ahead, Mr. Morris. I urged.
Well,
I read fluently in front of everyone. Now it's your turn to demonstrate your skills, Mr. Morris. I calmly confronted Morris. The problem set I handed him contained Spanish long passages from last year's university entrance exams. Morris reluctantly opened the problem set, attempting to translate it. However, he struggled and stumbled, unable to read it smoothly. Well, that's natural. When faced with unexpected circumstances, people can feel flustered and their minds can go blank. Moreover, Morris had only taught classes for middle school students and was not familiar with Spanish problems for university entrance exams. Witnessing this, the students immediately started jeering, and the classroom became noisy.
Joe can't do it. Aren't you from Cambridge University? What's the matter, Joe? You're not that great after all.
Quiet, everyone. I tapped the table with the textbook to signal for quiet, and the students, as if they were being shown something amusing, grinned at Morris. Morris blushed and lowered his head. Mr. Morris, as it is an important time for them, would you mind leaving the room? I asked calmly.
Fine,
Morris said quietly and left the classroom, walking dejectedly. I apologized to the bewildered students and resumed the class. Eventually, the class ended without further issues. Later, I sat in the staff room with Morris. The academy director approached Morris, his face red with anger.
Mr. Morris, what was that all about?
The director confronted Morris. The director explained that he became suspicious when he noticed that our classroom was unusually noisy while other classes remained quiet. He went to investigate and witnessed a commotion from outside the classroom. The director, who had tolerated the situation until now, seemed to have reached his limit.
well, I didn't mean to disrupt the class.
Morris replied, his voice surprisingly weak compared to his usual self.
If that wasn't an attempt to disrupt the class, then what was it?
The director asked sternly.
I'm sorry.
Morris mumbled, looking down and appearing completely worn out. The director began to lecture Morris. Seeing Morris in such a dejected state, I couldn't deny that I felt some responsibility for not speaking up earlier. The director then urged me to share my background and experiences. Though it was a headache-inducing topic, I couldn't deny that I had played a part in not disclosing my past. So, reluctantly, I began to speak. While I had mentioned that I hadn't experienced high school entrance exams, it was in the context of not having taken them in the United States. Strictly speaking, I wasn't a high school dropout. Due to my parents' job circumstances, I moved to Spain after graduating from middle school. Modesty aside, I was quite academically capable, and I skipped high school levels to graduate from university at the age of 18. Naturally, translating Spanish was a piece of cake for me. However, my life in Spain was full of challenges. I had to adapt to a new country and language. Despite the difficulties, I managed to overcome them. I was forced to use Spanish in daily life as conversations were conducted exclusively in the language. When I was getting used to everyday conversations in Spanish, although my language skills were improving, I felt quite isolated as there were no Americans around me. I resented my circumstances in such a turbulent environment, but I didn't want to make my parents worried. So I studied desperately and made efforts to improve my Spanish skills. As I approached graduation from university, I was contemplating which path to pursue, balancing it with my thesis. It was during this time that my grandparents in the United States fell ill. Given that both of my parents had been working since I was young, it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that my grandparents raised me. While my parents were considering placing them in a care facility, I decided to return home after my university graduation in order to give back the kindness they had shown me over the years. The once towering figures of my grandparents, who had seemed so large during my childhood, now appeared frail and smaller than anyone else. I never imagined a day would come when I would view the people who raised me in such a way. With a heavy heart, I embarked on the journey of caregiving, relying on the support of the assigned care manager and caregivers while concealing my bittersweet feelings. Although my parents provided financial assistance for caregiving, I had to earn my own living expenses. As a result, I started working part-time as a private tutor or a cram school instructor, jobs that allowed me to juggle caregiving responsibilities. I focused mainly on meal preparation, assistance, and household chores during the day, then headed to work in the late afternoon and evening. Even after returning home, I had to cater to their needs, and with concerns about wandering, I couldn't let my guard down for a moment. As a result, I could only manage to get 2 or 3 hours of sleep each night. Nonetheless, as the level of caregiving increased, the burden grew, and I had no choice but to quit my job as a cram school instructor. I gradually felt trapped, wondering how long this endless caregiving would continue. However, after a long period of caregiving, my grandparents passed away one after another. When my parents and relatives, who were temporarily back in the country, gathered, we were able to spend quality time as a family. After their remains were laid to rest, I decided to return to the cram school where I had worked before. The owner of the cram school had maintained contact with me even after I quit and had shown concern for my well-being.
If you're willing, would you consider coming back?
When they approached me with these words during a time when I was overwhelmed by a sense of emptiness due to the loss of my grandparents, I felt both grateful and anxious about the several years of gap in my employment. However, my colleagues warmly welcomed me back and treated me as if nothing had happened. Morris, without saying a word, just listened attentively. But suddenly, he stood up from his chair and even bowed to me.
Mr. Brown, regardless of the circumstances and not knowing the full story, I behaved terribly. I apologize.
So, Morris finally came to apologize to me. However, this incident was not resolved with just an apology. The following day, Morris's actions quickly became known to all the students and naturally reached the ears of their parents. It seemed that my flawless translations of difficult Spanish sentences became a hot topic, and I found myself being stared at in the hallways as if I were a celebrity.
Mr. Brown, what kind of example sentences will you translate today? Even if I want to take your class, I can never get a spot.
All I could do was smile wryly in response. Well, it was better to have a good reputation than a bad one. On the other hand, the negative reputation surrounding Morris seemed to know no bounds.
Today's class was too fast, and it was really hard to understand. Is it just me, or isn't he bragging too much about attending Cambridge?
Like this, requests to change classes from students who had been taking Morris's classes poured in, and complaints from parents flooded in on a daily basis, keeping the office staff busy with handling the situation. Morris desperately tried to defend himself, but there was no one to support him among his colleagues. It was no wonder, considering that his classes had been taken over and his methods had been criticized. As a result, Morris, who had rapidly fallen from his position as a popular instructor, ended up quitting the cram school. It's human nature that once the veneer is stripped away, despite being captivated by the illustrious background of attending Cambridge University, jealousy fueled by high academic achievements triggers a collective attack. During my time in Spain, I had witnessed such classmates and teachers countless times, so there was nothing else I could feel for Morris but sympathy. Well, it was his own doing, constantly looking down on people based solely on their academic background. With this incident, I hope Morris reflects deeply. Rumor has it that after leaving the cram school, he capitalized on the brand of being a Cambridge graduate and started working as a quiz-based YouTuber with his juniors. I heard about it from the cram school director and decided to watch his videos. Indeed, they had appealing content and structure that attracted middle and high school students. However, there was not a trace of the previous Morris who flaunted his academic achievements, and there were quite a few videos that incorporated moral elements. When I watched his very first introductory video, he mentioned how he studied diligently and got into Cambridge University because his parents only had a junior high school education. Come to think of it, I didn't know anything about Morris other than his status as a Cambridge graduate. He, too, had his own struggles and worked hard as a cram school instructor. By the way, this video seems to have the highest number of views, and the comment section is filled with supportive messages for him. This marks Morris's new starting line. With his remarkable charm, not limited to being a Cambridge graduate, he will surely entertain the viewers. As for me, I continue teaching the children as usual. Thanks to the word spreading about my proficiency in Spanish, the number of students who wish to take my classes has increased, and I have been honored with the title of a popular instructor. Whenever the class begins, there is always one question that comes up without fail.
Which high school did Mr. Brown attend? You've become famous for translating those difficult Spanish sentences.
If I go to the same university as you, can I become like you?
That incident has become a legend among the students within the cram school, and I was getting tired of it. As if on cue, the classroom would become noisy with comments like, "There's no way you could become like him," or the incident being brought up again. Quiet! With my stern reprimand, the classroom quickly fell silent. This is a good opportunity. Since you're aiming for entrance exams, I want you to keep this in mind deep in your hearts. "Oh, there's no need to write this in your notebooks," I said, taking a seat and facing everyone. A person's worth is not determined solely by their academic background. When I went to Spain, I encountered many individuals who were more academically gifted than me, and they possessed exceptional qualities as human beings and an unparalleled drive for self-improvement. Meeting them has been a lifelong treasure, and I still deeply respect them. While some of them couldn't pursue higher education due to their family circumstances, they managed to attend university while working and even went on to pursue doctoral degrees. On the other hand, by sheer chance, some were headhunted by top companies from their part-time jobs and led successful businesses. Going to a prestigious university does not guarantee becoming an outstanding individual, and being academically weak does not make someone worthless. Right now, all of you are studying hard, but what is the purpose? It's not just about acquiring knowledge. It's about how you utilize your abilities in studying or extracurricular activities. I want you to become individuals who can effectively utilize those abilities. Each person has their own strengths and weaknesses, and I hope you never look down on those who struggle. While envisioning Morris in the hardworking videos, I convey these words of wisdom to the students.